Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Magic the Gathering Unofficial Audiobooks Podcast. I am Phil Dawson, your humble narrator, and if you are following along with each release, I apologize for the delay. If you remember the last episode, I was complaining about allergies. Well, it turned out worse than that. I got the COVID. Struggled a bit with some coughing, shortness of breath, fever, all that. My family got it, so we were worried, but everyone's recovering okay. So I am back. Had you joined the Patreon, you'd have already known this episode would be delayed. I was able to alert the patrons about it. Anyway, we do have a new patron, too. Ray. Hello, Content Human. Thank you so much for joining up. I really appreciate it. Remember, if you want to support this project, keep things moving along for the future, and especially trying for our special Patreon goal where we're working hard at that. Of course, bringing my wife's best friend here for her birthday in October. Please check the link in the show notes or find me on Patreon. Just type in my name, Phil Dawson. It should pop up. I also absolutely love the messages and interacting with you on Twitter and Instagram, Phil and Sendai on both of those. It's great hearing from you. Plus, our Discord is alive and well, so come and join in and say hi. And lastly, I'm pretty displeased with myself because I completely blew the goblin voices in the last chapter. I mean, take a listen.
I've goblin voices. I'm ready to go. I'm ready for action. I basically just did mini oozes.
So that didn't sit well with me. So next time, they'll be ready. I just forgot I had them ready, and I pumped out the episode. So this episode, though, should make up for it because, well, I'll let you listen. Let's get to it. Chapter 15. This is our salvation, Urza said. He addressed the same group of scholars, Jorah, Teferi, and Karn at the head of the group, in the same study where he had first presented the design. The plans hanging behind the Pacing Master, however, were completely rethought. Thran metal was used only in key places. The rest of the structure was wooden. It will be capable of faster-than-sound travel, will be able to plane shift, will be fitted out with powerful offensive weapons, and is designed to bear its crew into the most hostile Phyrexian environments. It will be the ultimate strike weapon, arrayed to penetrate the enemy's defenses and destroy the heart of their attack. Urza paused as if waiting for Jorah's objection. She coughed discreetly in her hand, but offered no comment. One of the key changes to this design, you will notice, is its wooden hull. Given the properties of Thran metal, specifically its tendency to grow, I have determined that it is best used in conjunction with living materials, in this case wood, a specific kind of wood. Urza set down the pointer he had been using. Given the excellent progress you have made in the new alliance, I feel the time is right for me to take a brief absence to secure the wooden components. The once silent crowd was suddenly on its feet, protests coming from them all. What are you talking about? Bring us to this inferno and then leave? How are we supposed to keep them from killing each other? Jorah's voice rose above the others. Only reason the Accord has worked as well as it has is because you are here, the ever-present and incalculable foe. Let them think I am still here, then, Urza said. If you want, I can even arrange a few illusory appearances during my absence. I'm speaking of only a few days away. That assurance quieted much of the objection. Jorah was still dubious. What if it is longer? Urza seemed to consider, his eyes twinkling. Then he gave a small shrug. You will manage. You always have. In the meantime, I have some new specifications for Thran metal castings, the fittings for the ship. I want you to get started on them. Also, I have these specifications for the size and shape of the power stone I need for the ship's engines. Jorah, I want you and Teferi personally to oversee its creation. Urza descended into the heart of a dense jungle, into the heart of an ancient dream. It was called Yavimaya. Its ancient trees reached 3,000 feet into the sky, and 3,000 feet into the ground, and 3,000 years into the past. Just beneath Urza's feet, shod in gold-gilt sandals, suitable to his role as ambassador for all of Dominaria, spread the tumbled landscape of treetops. Multi-headed crowns nodded sagely in the high winds. Among their shifting forms, giant limbs twisted, as large and brown as whole hillsides elsewhere. In the hollows of some of the massive boughs, clear waters gleamed in wide and twisting lakes, 30 feet deep above smooth-skinned bark. Daily rains filled these raised lakes, their verges hung with shaggy curtains of moss and Elven settlements crouched at their edges. Waterfalls cascaded from the lakes, down boughs or empty air into darksome forest below. Urza did not stop among the elven folk. He sought none of the forest's inhabitants individually, but all of them collectively. He sought the spirit of the forest itself, Yavimaya. In places, a magnificent tree had succumbed at last to the colonies of worms and termites that riddled its city-sized trunk, or to the rot of deep roots and lightless slime, or the implacable time clock within it, and had fallen. Many dead giants leaned against their neighbors, forming vast decaying ramps down into the murk. On such slopes, whole new ecologies of undergrowth and grazing beast and sharp-eyed hunter grew up. Other trees, the titanic ones that could not be held aloft in their creaking plummet toward ground, opened vast pits in the forest canopy, giving view down thousands of feet, past the mounded and ranging bulk of the world trees to the tangle of roots at their base. Urza entered one of these empty shafts now. He watched in appreciation as the huge sprawl of tree summits rose to close out the sky. Only a large, ragged hole remained overhead. All around him, single-tree forests shivered bright green against the blue sky in its scrolling clouds. The high breaks of branch and bloom gave way to lower ranks of coiling vine and draping lichen. They in time surrendered to dark, cold, plunging depths, reached only by manifold waterfalls and the ever dimmer sunlight. The air turned cold, wet, and biting. Urza formed a thick woolen cloak atop his silken robes of state. The fabrics fanned out in the cool wind, making him seem some great black spider descending an invisible thread. In time, his gemstone eyes adjusted to the murk. He saw whole new worlds around him. The curved boughs were inhabited. Giant ant-like creatures swarmed blackly over a knot in one of the ancient trees. The rotten center of the knot formed a great archway that gave into an enormous interior chamber. As Urza slid downward, he peered past guard ants poised at the brink of their colony and saw into the teeming blackness inside. There, hunks of fruit and severed segments of leaf and dead carcasses of tree goats were borne along in caravans to inner storage places. Translucent white larvae lay in careful nests tended by tireless workers. A queen, who was the size of a parade of elephants, laboriously dragged her moving bulk, leaving a trail of wet globs in her wake. Just below the colony, placid herds of long-horned cattle grazed on terraces of bark. These beasts were tended by the ant creatures as though they were mere aphids in a garden. A sheer drop layer beneath the cattle fields, a few hundred feet farther down, giant cobwebs clung. They held rolled white pouches, some vaguely cow-shaped, others ant-shaped, and still more with human or elven form. Urza was careful to steer clear of the sticky strands of web in his course toward the bottom. Wherever life could cling, it did. Villages of elves dwelt on shallow swoops of tree bark. Forest sprites lived in spangled beauty among the deep dew fields. Dryads peered out distrustfully at him from folds of bark, and naiads glared from their silvery cascades that dropped from aerial lakes. Tree goats bounded up the sheer faces of the tree boles. Black and gold-skinned cats stalked among fields of moss. Beneath it all, on the tangled roots at the base of the trees, druids appeared once in a while. They stared up at Urza in fierce resistance before disappearing beneath the ground. He gazed down at the root cluster. As vast as the boughs above, the roots of the trees climbed over each other in a muscular jumble. In places, the tightly laced structures held dark pools of water or small banks of new tree growth. Where the roots did not connect, though, were triangular wells of darkness. During millennia of growth, the trees had depleted all the earth beneath them, drawing it up in their bowls. The result was vast emptiness under the root cluster, broken only by more waterfalls and fat taproots. At the distant base of this murk, waters toiled in perpetual darkness. This was the realm of the forest druids, crisscrossed by thousands of causeways, stairs, and cave passages. They would put up a fierce resistance to any program Urza might suggest. They would know of Argoth. As Urza settled his gold-gilded feet on the root ball of the massive tree, a sudden dread rose through him. This place was uncannily like Argoth. Its elves descended from those who had fled the forest he and Mishra had destroyed. There were ghosts here, the ghosts of Urza's past, but he had not come to commune with ghosts. He had come to discover the future. Urza lifted his hand in invocation.
I am Urza Planeswalker. I have come for an audience with Yavimaya. We must discuss the coming war. I wish to ally myself with you. We must confer upon the fate of our world.
Multani had known the invader even before he spoke his name. The forest recognized the monster much as a body recognizes a contagion it had once suffered. Defiler of Argoth, destroyer of elves, Terror's twin, the End Man, slayer of the people of the world, Urza Planeswalker. Even as the man descended through the foliage of the upper forest, Multani surged up the bole of a great Magnagoth tree. He gathered himself in myriad surges of sap and pulses of green wood. From the roots of that ancient colossus to its spreading crown thousands of feet above, the Magnagoth came to exquisite life. The soul of the forest quickened every twig and leaf and tendril. Multani could have flexed the massive roots like the tentacles of a squid and marched the enormous tree through Yavimaya. He could have reached out with any of the Magnagoth's 100,000 bows and snatched Urza and crushed him. Could have slain the man 10,000 times in clouds of mold dust or swarms of arboreal spiders or lashing storms of bows, but he did not. Not yet. This man was no mere man. He had become a power since Argoth. He had drawn the might of the land into him and was perhaps a match for Multani and Yavimaya. He had become a planeswalker and could wink into and out of existence with a thought. It would take a careful trap to capture this one. It would take all the mesmerizing force of the forest's mind to drive from the planeswalker any thought of escape. Only then could he be contained. Only then would Argoth have its vengeance. Until then, though, Multani would seduce the planeswalker into a trap. He watched patiently, following Urza down the trunk of the great tree. He would marshal the might of Yavimaya and lead Urza into doom, just as surely as Urza had led Argoth into doom. A pang jagged through Multani. The man was calling on the land. He was summoning its power, as he had back in Argoth. He was daring to compel the forest, he said, he had come to consult. Multani sifted all the faster downward, hurrying to reach the spot where the man stood. No matter how many creatures Urza summoned, this was Multani's forest. He would take them back, free them from the bidding of the Defiler. To treat with Yavimaya, Multani thought bitterly, you must treat with me. Urza had finished his invocation, but the forest had not answered. He stood for some time, letting the verdant air sift over and around him. He could wait, of course. The forest knew he was here, sensed his power as assuredly he had sensed its, but Urza was never content to wait. He always felt better if he could tinker. He reached into his vast reserves of sorcery and summoned forth a swarm of sprites. A flowing cloud of gold and silver cleaved from the treetops high overhead and danced down on the breezes towards him. Urza watched in silent amazement. Though the cloud was still 1,000 feet above, his gemstone eyes made out the tiny darting creatures within it. Winged and delicate, the sprites approached, a high song in their tiny throats. The melody ranged hypnotically through many tonal structures, sinuous and ineffable. Soon Urza could make out words in the song.
Return among us, child of ages, sing a reconciling song, and burn the pages where long the sages condemned thee. Sing forgetful, sing of mild regretful things, before the forest nodding head, let dead bury dead, and then arise to sing again.
The words plucked strangely at Urza's mind. He remembered those voices, small and chime-like against the waterfall roar of wind in the leaves. Remembered sprites fighting among druids and elven archers, their voices raised then in fury and condemnation. These creatures sang instead of reconciliation. They sang as though they were miniature barons. Delighted, Urza moved to cast a second summoning spell. The sorcery was never completed. Already the forest responded. New ambassadors arose. To the convolute roll of the gnat song came also a slow, low gulping sound. It came from among the roots of the Oreotorpic trees, shadowy gnomes within their barrows. Their tones made a basso counterpoint to the whistle-high melody.
O nations, rise into the dawning light, where bright our generation's hope has come. Speak, O dumb, and dance, O lame, the night of blame
Urza stood in the midst of the swelling chords, daring to hope that this ancient forest had grown up outside of the pole cast by Argoth's death. Perhaps short-lived sprites and gnomes would simply not remember that time. The folk who would not forget, could never forget, would be the elves. Urza needed to know their mind. As though summoned, they came. Elves of the high forest. They came from behind every tree, from within every fold of root upon root. Their eyes were bright and wide in the gray twilight of the place, and glowed luminous and green. They came, singing too, their voices at last providing the main body of the chant-like round of the other creatures.
Hello, Urza, we know of you from dark times past that nearly slew us, every mother's son, and tore our bodies limb from limb. That war was hateful, true, but now we live in peace and health. We wish to give you all you ask, to save our world from such a grave, as once you dug that terrible day.
The three groups of singers converged around Urza. Sprites danced in glowing daisy chains in the air around him. Shadow gnomes scuttled from their burrows to crouch like toads among the moss beds. Elves treaded with preternaturally light footfalls among the roots. Urza listened to their singing. His mind could hear each strain separately and all of them together. His foot lightly tapped the root ball where he stood. He heard another voice. A deep rumble, more massive and hollow and mournful than even Karn's. The sound came from all around as though the air itself spoke. The clammy breath of it, though, came from behind Urza. He pivoted, seeing only a vast wound in the base of the tree. The gouge was 3 times his height. Bark had struggled hard to close over the gash. Great rolled lips of wood still strained to come together. Next moment, those same bark lips drew apart, and smaller rents in the side of the tree opened above. Knots rolled beneath. The wound spoke.
Welcome, Urza Planeswalker. We are Multani, spirit of Yavimaya.
The face in the wood was utterly mournful, the mask of tragedy with only shadows for eyes.
We remember you.
The planeswalker bowed his head and actually dropped to one knee on the root cluster.
Forgive me. What I did 3 millennia ago, I did to save Dominaria from hideous invaders.
To Argoth, you and brother with hideous invaders,
replied the voice, haunting as a chorus of the dead.
I had to sacrifice Argoth, or sacrifice the whole world,
said Urza, almost pleading.
I did not doubt. Titania of Argoth would have made the same choices were she strong enough to.
Titania had been strong enough before they were despoiled,
the tree spirit replied.
As I said before, forgive me.
We are not Titania. We are not Argoth. We are Multani of Yavimaya.
We have welcomed you, the voice said, and the lagging chorus of sprites, gnomes, and elves resumed. The melody coursed, coy and yet somehow cloying, through Urza, like the dank wind moving through his robes. There was a wild geometry to the tones as they twisted in and out of each other. The notes trickled upon Urza. Waves of sound lay beside waves of energy, nudging them into their pattern. He closed his eyes a moment, struggling to assemble a response to Multani. Whenever a pair of words connected in his mind, though, they were soaked apart by the gentle nudge of the song.
We would speak to you at length of this coming invasion.
Urza nodded, his eyes opening. He was slightly startled to realize he was standing. When had he risen to his feet? The question melted away on the pulsing song. Such matters were unimportant. There were allies here. There was music. For the first time since his ascension, Urza felt true joy. The sharp-edged box of his intellect softened into a warm, hazy buzz like a swarm of bees or a swarm of sprites.
We would first treat you to a festival dinner to celebrate our newfound association.
Yes, thought Urza, I am hungry. There was something wrong with that thought, something Urza could not quite identify. He couldn't remember the last time he had eaten. course he was hungry. If the forest's fare was as sumptuous as its music, he would eat himself sick. Surely there would be wine and other delights to the appetites. Urza would indulge them all. There was something wrong with that thought, too. The nagging objections bubbled up, drowned through the flood of music.
Return among us, child of ages. Sing the reconciling song, and burn the pages where long the sages condemned thee. Sing, forgetful, sing of mild regretful things. Before the forest's nodding head, let dead bury themselves in dead. Sing, forgetful, sing.
When had he begun to sing? When had he ever not sung? Urza's voice, deep and resonant in the edifice of sound, moved among the smiling tones of the sprites and gnomes and elves. The mouth of the tree opened wide. The company of fairy folk guided Urza forward. He paced, solemn and happy, into the yawning space and down the throat of the enormous tree. There would be a feast in these deeps. There would be more music and lights and festival. Except that all of it was behind him now. Darkness and wood and the irresistible power of Yavimaya pulsed in the very heart of the gigantic tree. Then these things were all around. The mouth spoke one last time.
We would speak to you at length also the last invasion.
With that, the tree's mouth closed, its throat as well. Urza, caught in wood and the thick darkness, wondered dimly where he was and how he was and who he was. He would be able to think, were it not for all the pervading mind of the forest, curing him like cedar smoke, changing him, preserving him in place. But not preserving him. Urza felt his body dissolving away into wood. His fingers were first to go, each burning with incandescent agony. His every nerve sizzled beneath the skin. His bones turned to chalk and rubbed away in the sooty gnawing of the heartwood around him. His fingers and toes, harvested slowly by the massive tree, turned into mere minerals.
When Harbin, son of Urza Planeswalker, landed upon Argoth, he sought a green limb to replace his fall on his flying machine. In its mercy, the forest showed him a fallen limb that perfectly suited his needs. In repayment, the man returned to the heart of Argiv to bring back armies of ravagers to harvest the forest. Men and machines fell on ancient trees, slew druids, hunted creatures into extinction, pillaged, burned, raped, destroyed, all to the glory of Urza and his brother Mishra. Slowly they ate away at Argoth, killing Titania, his spirit.
The words were needless. Urza had become Titania. His body had become a vast forest. He felt in every tissue of his being the destroying, despoiling work of his own armies. Minute creatures invaded his body and, mote by mote, turned him into mere minerals, mere resources. Urza would have screamed, but he was no longer Urza. He would have planeswalked from the spot, but that would mean leaving his body, the forest, behind. He could only hang there, encased in wood, and endure.
Urza is arriving in Yavimaya even as I write this. I know the forest's position as unreachable and forbidding as Shiv. He hopes to return in 2 days' time. Knowing Urza's sense of time and guessing about the reception Yavimaya will have for him, I'll give him a week before I become unsettled. This could well be the pivotal point for Urza. He's shown he's capable of building human alliances and, more than that, building coalitions among many races. Perhaps by creating an alliance with Yavimaya, he can make amends for Argoth. Perhaps no amount of penance can ever make amends for such atrocity. We have our own atrocities underway in Talaria. Just today I led a charge of scorpions against Phyrexian entrenchments at the border of Slate Waters. Given the physiology of my mechanical forces, a pincher movement naturally suggested itself. We flanked the main body of Phyrexians left and right and trapped them in their trenches. They were caught between us and the temporal curtain. I sent scorpion units flooding into the dens. Meanwhile, I drove a wall of wind down the middle. Flushed from cover, the beasts fell back into the time curtain at the edge of that charred swamp. I ordered it charged. We hurled them into the rift. That passage would have killed any human. It did little more than further jangle these fiends. Even so, the extreme slow time of slate waters halted the Phyrexians in a thick wall. I ordered the scorpions to fire. Corals stormed out a killing gale. The front line of Phyrexians was nearly sawed in half. They were spewing glistening oil in a cloud before them by the time a human contingent arrived to reinforce us. One young woman tore a hunk of cloth from beneath her armor coat and doused it with oil from a fallen scorpion. She struck the cloth on a spent coral, ignited it, and hurled the thing into the gap. It entered the spray of glistening oil. A dull orange glow spread from the spot. The fiery coral hung strangely in the air as slow flame rolled laterally along the Phyrexian lines. We stopped firing. We stood, staring in a mixture of exultation and dread. Languid tendrils of flame coiled out around fiendish arms and legs. We watched as our foes ignited. The cheer that came from us when hair and carapace were limbed in flame devolved quickly to a groan. Eyeballs ruptured from the heat, limbs were blasted away. The deep, horrid roar of dying monsters struck us. "Back!" I yelled. Even I was cemented in place when the blaze went critical. White hot, the flash was blinding. We fell back then by instincts alone. Clutching our eyes, we clambered over stalled scorpions and mired dead to escape the coming blaze. When the blast at last emerged from slate waters, most of us were half a mile into the forest. Even so, it flung us to our faces, and, like the warriors on Argoth of old, we could only pray the sun-bright blast would someday end. It will be another Argoth, this conflict. The Phyrexians press us day and night. Their numbers grow greater with each sally. Their magical might will soon be the equal of mine. The students are weary of fighting, and though I have employed my most awe-inspiring battle spells, I am not a charismatic leader. Joyra and Teferi were better suited for that. Urza, despite all his inhumanity, perhaps leads best of all. Baron, Mage Master of Talaria.